My people, we're ready to mount up like a eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King, you can hear it when I rhyme. I'm a king, renewed in my mind. I'm a king, I got a different bloodline. I'm a king, jump, I am a king. Yeah.
Welcome to the King Talks podcast, where we're all about truth, community, and discussing the things you care about because we care about you. Of course, I'm your host, Adam Coleman. And I have to say, man, it's definitely dope to be back in the saddle again with King Talks, man. We had a dope show with Jay Morrison. It was a phenomenal chat just about finances and his story. We're going to be getting into that. You guys know how we get down here with Table Talks, man, where we really kind of just put our thoughts in there as to what's going on in our community and how we can take what our guests talk about and really apply them in ways that develop our community and so forth. So buckle up, y'all. We had another episode of Table Talks on the King Talks podcast.
My people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King, you can hear it when I rhyme. I'm a king, renewed in my mind. I'm a king, I got a different bloodline. I'm a king, jump, I am a king.
So kicking off the discussion, I want to introduce my man, Sean Slaughter. What up, bro?
You. What's up, Lane? How you doing, man? Oh, and please forgive me because his name is Adam, but
right.
back in the day, his rap name was Scott Lane. Or now in the day, his rap name is
now in the day.
Now in the day, his rap name is Scott Lane. So I know him as Lane. So
Right.
So I'm not going to say Adam. I don't even acknowledge your first name exists.
Right. Same thing with my family members do the same thing. I pretty much, I'm just going to change my name legally at this point because nobody calls me by my real name. Even my wife.
But yeah, man, I'm good, man. It's great to be here with you guys.
Definitely, man. Well, I've known you for quite a while, man. We're going to be getting back to you in a second, but I also want to introduce my man, Rob Jones, who's a fellow King member here. How you doing there, brother?
How you doing, fellas? Pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you. So I go by Rob, so there are no nicknames or no other names, and I did have a little rap career that
okay.
Not a lot of people know me for, but it's
we have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we definitely have
future
to.
talk.
Man, we might just do a cipher, man. Forget the table talk. We might just spit bars for like an hour. You know what I'm saying?
Word.
But this episode right here is a special one because my man Sean, for a lot of folks who don't know, will be stepping up to the plate. And as the host of the King Talks podcast, I'll be switching roles as a regular panel guest on the Table Talks. But Sean, being an entrepreneur, a recording artist, and now you're going to be a talk show host. How does it feel, bro, to be stepping into that role?
It feels pretty dope. For most people that know me, I was a recording artist for about 15 years and released several albums and also did a podcast called The What in the Ham Sandwich Show for about 15 years as well. And so have a fan base that know me from music, have a fan base that know me from the podcast. And, we stopped the podcast about 2 years ago. And I was looking for something just like this, something that we can kind of speak into the community, speak about Black issues, speak about global issues, world issues, and issues just right in our backyard. You know what I'm saying? And of course, do it through the lens of Christ, but also through our culture. And so, when this opportunity presented itself, I was definitely all in. And it's definitely a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it, man, because actually this is a conversation, like with these table talks, this is going to be a conversation that you and I have been having for like forever. 8 years now.
Forever.
You know what I'm saying? Forever.
Exactly.
Forever. For cats who don't know, man, me, Sean, and my man Brick, shout out to my man Brick, by the way. We would get up early in the morning, go work out at the gym and have these kind of discussions. Well, they would work out. I would work out about half the time. I would do about half the reps. Show up half the time and do half the reps. But when I was there, though, we had some dope discussions, though. You know what I'm saying?
All day,
man. So this is just going to be a continuation of that. I'm excited to have you on here, man. And, definitely it's going to be dope chopping it up. But my man, Rob, coming back to you, bro. I definitely want to get your thoughts on the interview because as I was listening back over it and just chewing on all that great financial content and preparing for this King Talks podcast, I was just really excited about the contribution that you can make to this discussion, because you're the money guy, man. If cats want to get their money right, you that dude, man. Tell us a little bit about, what you bring to the table and just the direct connection that you have with our guest that we just had, Jay Morrison.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm just excited about King. I'm excited about this conversation. I'm excited about just listening to just Jay's heart, listening to his story, listening to just how granular he attempts to teach. He doesn't want to not only attempts, but he actually does it, and he does it successfully. And I've been at several of his corner classes in several states, just as a friend there to support. But long story short, I think at the end of the day, my story is I didn't know anything about finance. I grew up in a pretty rocky background. Both of my parents were drug addicted on crack during the crack epidemic, and moved around a lot. Times went to decent schools, times went to horrible schools. It just really depended. And so when I came out of college, or when I was getting through college, before I even graduated, I was real good at call center jobs. And a lot of times, you can get those jobs in certain places where you're picking up the phone. But whatever it is, I got a job in an investment company through the call center, and started doing well, and got a job at Morgan Stanley as a result of that. I didn't know what a mutual fund was walking into Morgan Stanley to deal with mutual funds. And I had to play catch up and learn these things. But then once I learned it, it just became, hey, our people don't know this, and how come I didn't know this? And so I think what's exciting about this topic is just like with Jay, that when your scales fall from your eyes, you immediately want to go back and teach. It's like that passage in K.I.N.G where the lepers find the jewels, and they find the abandoned army, and they said it'd be selfish for us to be here and not share this with the Israelites. And so in the same way, once you learn something, having that conversation, advancing that conversation is what I'm really impressed by Jay, because he takes it to the streets. And I'm impressed by King because we try to address real topics.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. I have to say that Jay Morrison interview is definitely one of the realest interviews I've ever done. You know what I'm saying, whether it be on this show or True ID as well. Definitely was a real interview. And I think, what captivates people about him is his story. You mentioned about, him really coming up in the streets and coming from that background and translating that into where he is now. I kind of just want to throw that out to you guys. Like, as you guys sat back and listened to the show, like, what really stuck out to you about, his story and maybe parts that you can relate to and things of that nature?
Well, I'll kind of jump in. Currently, I teach at an alternative school. I teach technology to middle school students. And most of the kids that come to me have been kicked out of their regular schools. They're coming home from juvie. They have community charges and things like that. I think what's interesting is, if you want to tear a culture down, what you do is the things that will actually build them up and sustain them, you make those things foreign, and the things that will destroy them, those things kind of become the badges of honor. And so when Jay was talking about the culture of drug dealing, that was socially acceptable, and the culture of crime, that my kids, drug dealing, crime, gun running, all these different things that are socially acceptable to them. But you talk about stocks, you talk about mutual funds, you talk about real estate, you talk about starting a business, you talk about entrepreneurship. These things are so foreign to them, and I would be interesting in kind of hearing Rob's thoughts, being that coming from two parents who were addicted to drugs, and growing up in the same society. I grew up in Queens and where these things were socially acceptable, to now where you're on Wall Street and you're learning some of the stuff. What are your thoughts on that, especially kind of growing up?
Yeah, I think, the concept of making money, I think the concept of, if you could think back, being from Queens myself, thinking back some of the Nas and AZ lines, even from back then, the buck that bought a bottle could have struck the lotto. There was always a mentality of, what are some things that I could be doing with this income that I have. And even some raps about, stocks and bonds and Lloyd's of London's and all these things with Focus. They float in and out of that era of rap where I think there was kind of still that head nod, hip hop, kind of think about what's going on feel. So I think we've always had that. And so if you notice, when we do go into the business sector, we have what I would say the startup capital and the knowledge, then you tend to see some pretty amazing deals. So even from our neighborhood, you look at Dave and John, you look at 50 Cent, you look at Steve Stout, you look at all these people who have gone into private equity and have killed it and literally have multiplied their wealth deal after deal after deal. And so the concepts are similar to the things that you want to do in the drug game, and some of your things you want to do with hustle. You want to flip that, come back, and an 18,000% return in the drug game, which is what you can get. It's just hard to beat that. But if you learn that, okay, I may not get an 18,000% return, but I could get 26 times my return. I can get 10 times my return. I can get 2.5 times my return, and then flip that and not go to jail, then you'll take that any day. And I think that's why you'll see successes breed successes. So the 50 Cent vitamin water deal, once you get that capital, how long ago was that? If you really think back, what are we talking? Almost a decade ago. And so how many things can you now have? What can you have done with that money in 10 years? Well, if you invested in Amazon, that's 26 times. Take that money he would have gotten if he put in Amazon stock, 26 times that number is just an obscene amount of numbers. So these are the types of things that folks on Wall Street live, dream, think about for 16, 17, 18 hours a day.
Yeah, it's real. And I mean, as I was kind of sitting back, listening to you guys talk about it, like the word exposure kept coming to mind. Like what are our people exposed to? I remember a couple of years ago, I was doing therapeutic mentoring. It was basically like being a big brother to, kids who were in difficult neighborhoods and things like that. And I decided to do like a thought experiment with one of the kids I was working with. So I asked him, I was like, what would you say are some things that a white person can do to make money and do well for themselves? And it was just real interesting. So he named out like 5 things. He's like, oh, he could be president. He could be a doctor. He could own a business. This is stuff he was coming up with off the top of his head. So then I flipped and I was like, okay, well, what could a black person do to make money? And he said, oh, we could sell bootleg CDs. He could sell drugs. He could, be a hitman for somebody to make money. It was just like a totally different list, obviously. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But in his mind, in his 13-year-old mind, there were things that, white people could do legally to make money that black folks just could not do, and I think that it's just a matter of exposure, right? The question is, to me, I think it's not just always a matter of education, right? I mean, you can give people all the X's and O's and they can, be as erudite as possible. But if you don't have an awareness of your options, what are your options in terms of getting out here and making a living for yourself, then you're still going to be limited. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that's another thing. And I do think that at times we, specifically in areas of entrepreneurship and involvement in the investment field and finance field, a lot of times, unfortunately, we look at the lack of desire to get involved or the lack of exposure, but there also has to be, a serious addressing some of the lanes that were, historically closed and purposely closed. Yeah. And, there is an impact of mass incarceration on getting you into the banking industry. And if you're in a neighborhood where, as a teenager, the likelihood of you being stopped and frisked for anything within your entire teenage life, on average, how many times a year? So before they find, before you get through high school, before you get through college, the chances of you being able to pass the screening that these jobs require is just a lot more difficult. And then in terms of entrepreneurship and starting own businesses, this is the angel capital, that very first startup, that $10,000 that started Crate and Barrel, that $20,000 that started Instagram, that, $2,000 loan that started this or that company. If you don't have access to even that, then it's very difficult to really see your dream come through, or actually live in a situation where you're seeing businesses started, because generally a lot of times you're seeing businesses fail.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. And I wonder, like, too, I'm gonna come at you, Sean, with this one. Like, I know you've had the Life Power Music Mentoring organization that you've been running for a while. In your experience, what do you think it is that helps that child to see these opportunities versus the one who just doesn't see it? Like, how do you have you had experience where you see that light bulb go off, like, wow, boom, this is something that I can really do?
Yeah, I one of the reasons that we do Life Power is to reach kids where they are. So I run a recording studio, and we allow kids to come into the studio, and we teach them how to make beats. And through learning how to make beats, they learn how to run the software. So right now I'm in my recording studio. I'm recording on Logic Pro, and the kids will have an opportunity to do this. And we use, I'm big into technology, and I'm big into trying to get kids to be interested and connected to technology, because that's really where the world's going. And so we use, kind of the carrot of making beats to allow them to get engaged in technology. And so I think getting kids interested or interest-based programs, or interest-based, if a kid is interested in something, they're going to be involved. If a kid is interested in really making money, they may want to get involved in real estate. They may want to get involved in Wall Street. I think they're all interested in making money, but really trying to hit their passions. Unfortunately, like Rob said, there's been so little opportunity, within these neighborhoods. And Jay talked about it. He made this statement where he says that people who are drowning in despair will do anything to feed themselves. And so when you have options, when you have choices, when you've been exposed, you can develop a little bit more grit to deal with your situation. When you don't feel like you have options, when you haven't been exposed to anything, when you're kind of ignorant simply because of where you live, then all of a sudden you're going to do anything to feed yourselves. And so I think for those who are kind of at the bottom, I think you have to draw them in with their interests. Music is always a big interest, so I think you draw them in with their interest. One thing I like doing when I do workshops, I like talking about, I do this one workshop where I talk about who are the top 10 most paid hip-hop artists of 2017, 16, 18, whatever year. And so the kids usually thought all these names, these YouTube rappers and so on and so forth. And then I pull the list up. And generally you have Diddy is up there. He's either one or two. Jay-Z is up there. He's either one or two. 50 Cent is up there. He's usually top 5. Birdman is up there.
Put some respect on his name, dog. He's supposed to be number one. You need to be number one. Put some
respect on his name.
Put some respect on it, dog.
Yeah, you got to read that.
You hear me, Playboy?
You're going to get a visit.
You know what I'm saying? But what's interesting about the list was that Dr. Dre is typically up there as well. What's interesting about the list is that the majority, if not all of these guys, didn't make money just off of music. They made money off their brands. They made money off of business partnerships and things like that. And so I try to use those interests in artists that they like and say, here's an artist that you like, here's something that you like. Now follow me down the yellow brick road. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that's kind of been a way to just get particularly young black males interested, in things other than rapping, basketball, and so on and so forth.
I kind of say it sometimes, like, you got to make, and this sounds terrible, but you have to make boring money sound interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody wants to be,
facts.
LeBron James. They want to be, Diddy. Anybody on the list that you just named. I don't know if people really want to be Birdman now, but everybody else on that list, you know what I'm saying? I think people want to be that guy. They want to be in the music videos.
Yeah.
But do people really want to sit down in front of a computer screen and throw numbers around? Like, people don't really want to do that. But one thing we do know is that boring is not dope. I mean, excuse me, being broke is not dope. Like, nobody wants to be broke. And I think that, if you can show people, like, hey, you can actually make a really good living for yourself. Like, you don't have to be LeBron James. There's some other options out here. And actually, like you talked about, Rob, too, is that hasn't necessarily always been the case. You know what I'm saying? Like, that hasn't always been the case that we could, just get out there and get it any way that we wanted to, because there were very real and legal restrictions. As a matter of fact, Jay Morrison spoke about that as well in terms of redlining, and what that has meant to our community. I think a lot of people missed that in that episode. Rob, you want to break that down a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. I think the redlining aspect of education, of access to capital, banking restrictions, even access to high-speed internet, that's a very real thing. And in addition to redlining, and a byproduct of redlining is also high rent situations. And Jay mentioned that statistic too, that the educational outcomes, marriage outcomes, life outcomes of renters does tend to be worse than those who own where they live. And so the way redlining, of course, in banking, in finance, and in terms of people's familiarity with finance, the way that works is in certain districts, you just basically shut down the typical conventional mortgage shops, and it's a neighborhood of renters, and so instead you open up payday loans, you open up auto title loans, you open up rent to own furniture. So where the normal there's in finance you have this thing called the yield curve, but the normal rates that the government charges, there's a spread above that the typical lender would want to expect for, say, a car or even credit card debt. That's all set on what the government sets as the rates. And so the rest of the economy will have low rates. In these neighborhoods, you'll see upwards of 300% rates charged on, payday loans. You'll have rent-a-center furniture where you're just obliterating people's wealth building opportunities. And so redlining has a historical impact on banking. And of course, in the, after the financial collapse and as these banks and everything were being sorted, many of them lost major cases for the aggression by which some of these brokers and the banks allowed these predatory lending opportunities to sink people further into a trap. And just like the quote that was shared, that Jay shared, that when you're drowning in the ocean, you'll reach for a toothpick to escape. If you tell somebody you can get a ninja loan, which is no income, no job application, and you say, what? I can get a loan right now. I can buy the house across the street and I'm renting. Of course. Yeah. And you can bring your mother in. Of course, people are going to do that. And so, but then you find out it's all predatory lending. You find out that it was all, blockbusting occurred in many neighborhoods. So there are so many different ways that finance has disadvantaged people that, especially in historically disadvantaged communities, especially African Americans by and large, since the collapse of the Freedmen's Bank, there has really never been a real culture of banking and legitimate banking. And so hence our statements are more, no money don't grow on trees, money is the root of all evil. You tend to hear, I work hard for my money and you can't take it with you. And so if you're used to money being an evil, then you're going to raise your kids that way. And you're going to want to stay away from these things. And so I think demystifying finance, which is what I started a company on, and that's where Jay and I connected as kindred spirits and worked together to get the fund launched last year. And, he really did a good job of successfully raising $11 million in less than 10 days. And so just seeing opportunities like that to right some of these wrongs, to fix some of the redlining, because, the opposite of redlining is gentrification, where people are just kicked out of neighborhoods and don't keep the equity. So a lot of things to be done, but I think demystifying finance for people who've only seen the bad of it is really what is up. I think what God's calling all of us to do.
Now wait, I got to key in on that. And then that's something you said, something very interesting. You said that's what God is calling all of us to do. Now, what's interesting about that is right now there's a huge discussion going on in the evangelical world about the issue of social justice. Okay, this about a week or so ago, you had a group of evangelicals who released a statement denouncing essentially social justice and those who would advocate for it, declaring it to be contrary to the gospel. I find it fascinating that you said that, the kinds of things that you're talking about is something that God would have us to do. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what would you say would be, what is it about that you feel called about?
Several things. I think that, I'm going to get a little deeper here than I plan on going, but I'm going to speak directly because I think these are spiritual matters.
Go for it, yeah.
I have a strong conviction on false doctrine being the job of the church especially job of leaders of the church. The false doctrine of white supremacy is swimming in these evangelical churches. This concept of the curse of Ham, the concepts of slavery, the concept of even the fact that the Confederate flag could stand in evangelical Bible Belt states that knows that the entire meaning of that flag is white supremacy, which is based on an improper teaching of the book of Genesis, then that is a responsibility of the church and is a responsibility of Christian men. But what is that responsibility? Well, if white supremacy, teaches that the lack of leadership ability of an entire race of people, specifically the males, teaches the lack of ownership, teaches historically that this group of people kind of aren't meant for certain types of roles, jobs, places in the economy, places in the world. I think if we correct that for a lot of our kids, and just like Jay was saying, if we made it less fun and less attractive to live that fast life, by just explaining, like, by the way, you guys know that you're basically there's a false doctrine that's engineering you to live this life, and if people can see that, then not that it's going to get everybody, because the fast life does offer some really a lot of endorphins, but
that's a good way to put it.
To be honest, it does. And so, but other than that, if you can say, all right, that is why I look at myself. That is why I only see myself as a sexual being, as a black male. That is why Russians are setting up sites for interracial porn in order to push that agenda of a black male being a sexual beast, which that has existed as a pillar of kind of like, the stories, 1920s and Jim Crow, and a lot of the sales of the parts of the people that were lynched and hung were on sale, and a lot of it was a genitalia, and people there was a big economy around that inside a lot of these towns, and so people would sometimes kill just for the economy of what they'd sell. So there's this concept is still what drives us to think that we are men. And a man looks like someone who has a lot of girls. A man looks like someone who can fight. A man looks like someone who can go to jail and take a charge, as opposed to a man looks like someone who owns a house. A man looks like someone who can provide for his kids. A man looks like someone who can raise a family. And there's a doctrine, I believe, that we're we blacks prone to violence. And so if you that's when I say going all the way back, what does Scripture teach? And Scripture teaches use worldly wealth to gain friends is in the Bible. The Scripture teaches invest in seven ventures, yet 8, because you never know when disaster will strike. The Bible teaches these concepts, and so that's what a man looks like. And that you think of an investor, like you share with your what you said, Sean, that your kids think a man looks like a thug, but they don't look like a man who saves, a man who invests, a man who holds up for the long haul, a man who can make $10,000, $15,000 from a beach with a laptop with one trade. And seeing
I'm
that
trying to be that dude. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Definitely, man.
Hey, Lane, let me speak to that because Rob opened up about 7 Pandora's boxes. I don't even know where to start, man. So, concerning this statement that was released by the evangelical church, I think it's interesting. As an educator, a lot of the training that's going on now is talking about being socially, ethically, culturally, more ethical in your education. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, and this training is happening within the last couple of years for educators, and what they're saying is this: diversification. If you have a Hispanic kid in your classroom, what are you going to do in your lesson plan to reach that kid? How is your classroom and environment set up so that when a white kid and a black kid and a Hispanic kid walk into the classroom, how would they see themselves through the posters, within the lesson plan? Because we already know that the SOL is biased. You know what I'm saying? It's been created, to favor, a particular culture. And so they're trying to undo that. And I give them kudos for that. But to think that same idea does not run through the church is ridiculous. Man. And I think that's why you have these type of statements. You have these type of statements because let's keep 100. I traveled for about 15 years. I did about 100 concerts a year in churches all over the United States, Africa, Europe, so on and so forth. And I've seen now I go to a multicultural church, all right, led by a white pastor. So let me start that. Okay. I've seen one multicultural church. No, I've seen two in the 15 years that I've traveled led by a black pastor. That was multicultural, right? And the majority of the multicultural churches generally have a white pastor. And the question is, why is that? And I think it really goes back to to the idea of white supremacy, in the sense of, if we're going to be multicultural, then we have to sing it this way. We have to speak it this way. We have to act it out this way. And I think that's why when Lecrae came out with his statement on how he felt like he's being used by evangelicals, when he came out with that statement, what he was saying was, in order for me to even be validated, I had to be validated by you, and I had to do it. And I've been to his conferences. I had to worship your way. I had to preach your way. I had to think your way. And what he's saying is, but I have issues with social justice that every time I bring them up, don't nobody want to hear about.
Come on, bro.
And as a matter of fact, now y'all putting out statements.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Saying that this is, this is doesn't jive with the Bible. Psalm 82:3, vindicate the weak and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and destitute. You can go to Proverbs 22:16. He who oppresses the poor to make more for himself or gives to the rich will only come to poverty. Proverbs 29:7. The righteous is concerned. The righteous is concerned for the rights of the poor. The wicked does not understand such concern. So for you to even say you don't understand where we're coming from as concerning social justice, and that it doesn't jive with the Bible, it rings very similar to some of the political statements that we're hearing that say, I know you're kneeling, but we don't get that. You're being disrespectful.
Right.
You know, it smells funny.
Yeah,
it's you feel me?
And there's a proverb that you bring up that reminds me of this. Proverbs 22:22. Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court. And to live in some places where you can see that just from a revenue perspective, 80 to 90% of the revenue from tickets and small, stops and frisks and lower level crimes, 80% of the revenue will come from maybe 20% of the population that happens to be black and brown. And so you're clearly exploiting the poor in court. You're clearly crushing their needs. And so I think this concept of this came up at the summit this past year in Memphis, of the concept of a multi-cultural church really being a multiracial church that just happens to have one dominant culture. and just really how a lot of times churches throw out this term multicultural, but they're just white churches that have multiple races in attendance. And so, in terms of the agenda, for example, and I think it's what's really a blessing is I've just spent so much time with so many spiritually minded, learned white people that don't look at some of these topics as, okay, you're a rabble rouser troublemaker. It's been very refreshing that I believe as there's something unique that's happened, I'd say within the last 5 or so years, where just people are starting to go back in and dig through history. And I think a lot of my white friends are coming back and say, I really thought that, you guys were free as slaves and then y'all just kind of didn't do well, this capitalism thing, and we did well. Like literally, that's what America does teach if you think about it.
It's true. It's
right?
true.
There's
it's
really
true,
no clear, they say Jim Crow and they say segregation, say, all right, well, let's just say segregation then. Hey, segregation ended. Martin Luther King was ultimately the best victorious. He killed it. He did everything right. But the exact same statistics that he was speaking of are exactly the same statistics that there are today in terms of percentages. So what was he really successful in terms of economics? And so I think that the story of America has unfortunately just started to be reexamined in a way that, this new part of the new philosophy of the relativists is people really want to understand everything and redig and look at history and not trust anything, and it needs to make sense to me. And the good side of that is that people are going back in and realizing, okay, redlining did happen. Okay, school segregation did happen, and integration did fail as a policy because the country went and created 55,000 municipalities and then removed all the tax revenue from the inner cities, and then just kind of created mass incarceration right after that. So I think people that see that now look and say, man, we really have to fix this. And I'm really excited, and I really encourage all listeners to look up the Economic Opportunity Zone tax law that was pushed through by Tim Scott and Cory Booker, a bipartisan economic deal that I think is one of the best deals I've seen, period. If you say the FHA spending really only 2% went to blacks, and it really kind of created the whole suburban movement and kind of helped segregate the northern part of the country. If you say that was a $120 billion movement, this new law is going to be in the trillions, and it's actually has an opportunity to fix things, or it will gentrify our neighborhoods like never before. So one of the things that I really encourage everyone to look at is what the law is in terms of taxes. Yes, there is a big tax break, 1.6 billion. Most of 900 of it went to corporations, and about the rest went to the upper middle class. But this new law, that new change, however, it's going to create a 10-year incentive for investment in properties, and so really more to come on that. We'll definitely try to schedule a special talk on that, and put a couple papers together. But there are going to be opportunities for land appreciation, ownership, and business starting that I believe America is really starting to look at the trillions of its power and how it's spent, and starting to say, okay, we probably need to fix some of these things.
And see, that's the thing. I think it's a matter of tying all the pieces together. And what I mean by that, when you look at the civil rights movement, right, it was largely a morality movement. Is that racism is wrong. You had this strong theistic idea that God has created man, and that black people have dignity too. And from that vantage point, we were able to, fight for our rights. But it was largely a morality movement. But see, the flip side is following that moral movement, you didn't have the next step of an economic movement, right? To then follow behind that and say, okay, I'm glad that on these moral grounds we've been able to attain these rights. But now, in order to undo the damage that has been done, legally speaking, by redlining and just divesting from African American neighborhoods, we didn't institute an economic movement to follow behind that. And I think, Dr. King, had he not been gunned down, obviously, I think that he would have gone there, because he was, planning a Poor People's March, and he was looking at these things. He was looking beyond just the African American neighborhoods and looking at, just economics in general and how the poor were being taken advantage of. So unfortunately, he was assassinated. But I think that's where, the ball was dropped, is that we didn't follow up with this economic piece. And so tying those pieces together between morality, between, what the Bible has to say about right and wrong, and then getting down to the nitty gritty of how that actually plays out, I think that's where we miss a step. And I go back to something that you said too, Rob. You were talking about how it's almost like black people just live in a whole different world, from in terms of these interest rates and whatnot. To see a payday loan, I mean, it just seems natural. I mean, you see them all over the place, or all these different, rent centers and all this kind of stuff. But really, you're living in a whole different economic stratosphere that is so costly, it's not even funny. And that has piggybacked on the redlining that we've spoken about a couple of times, just banks divesting in property in black neighborhoods, leaving them vulnerable to those kind of predatory institutions and businesses. And to me, when I think about social justice, that's a social justice issue right there. When you divest from a community and then leave them economically vulnerable so that they have to then reach out for whatever, life raft they can get, you know what I'm saying? And that just so happens to be payday loans, which is going to plunge them even more into debt. And then you talk about the high rentership, which yields, worse incomes in terms of people staying married and health and all these other things that follow along with that. That's a social justice issue. And so I think about as a remedy, tying these things together, it's great if we can point these things out. We can note them in scripture. But then when I think about the Tulsa Fund that Jay Morrison talked about, when I think about this notion of, okay, we're going to take tangible steps to own our neighborhoods and thus, offset these negative outcomes from, having to pay all this and that in interest. To me, that's a social justice intervention. And that's the kind of thing that the church needs to be about. People who name the name of Christ and are interested in the well-being of others can, intervene in these neighborhoods in that way. And I kind of wondering, have you considered it from that angle? Like, is that how, like, the impetus behind what you do in terms of from your background?
Yes. And that's why I was just incredibly excited about the Tulsa Fund and intricately involved in really helping. I told Jay, anything you need, I'll help you. And we really hit it off from day one, because both being concerned about the issues that need to be fixed, and seeing that this new SEC law came out, which is a result of the Jobs Act. There's no reason why not to use it. And he had this great idea, him and his partner Rashard and Janetta, just a great team of folks that really, at the end of the day, wanted to do the right thing. And just seeing those solutions played out, I think, is what I believe is what needs to happen, because the excitement of the just the black ownership, the fixing societal issues, the social justice, all of that kind of merging into action-based steps is just what I believe is the solution that I believe Jay. I'm saying I believe a lot. It's in my opinion, what Jay offers is vastly different than every time I look at Instagram, or every time I look at Facebook, or every time I look at Twitter. I see another person shot, another person attacked, another person choked, another person economically exploited. I see my family getting economically exploited. I see the stripper culture, which is really an economic issue, raising to where, girls just really feel that's the best way for them to make the most money. And so the opportunity cost of being a stripper is low. And so you see all these things, and all right, hey, just put $100 or put $1,000 towards your neighborhood and help build. That to me is what's really fantastic about just how he was able to leverage the platform of social justice and able to maneuver that into a real SEC registered solution.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the kind of looking at the website right now, it's pretty dope. So the fund offers anybody, I guess it's the buy a brick campaign, which I like the slang there, and where an investor can invest a a maximum of $50 million down to a minimum of $500, and to basically be involved in a fund. And you can monitor investment, you can collect dividends, and I think it's amazing how like Rob said, he's created this this fund that anybody really can, if you know nothing about real estate, anybody or funds or stocks or anything like that, you can kind of get your feet wet with this. And one of the quotes that Jay made, where he talked about home ownership, and ownership is really the solution to gentrification. You can't get kicked out if you own it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And so this whole idea of moving black dollars and funneling them to a point where they're owning land and owning real estate, and you really can he talked in the podcast about Black Wall Street,
Right.
and it seems like this is where that fund comes from, where you have black ownership, you have control of what's happening concerning real estate and land, but it's also an investment, and you can make a dividend, you can make some money off of it. So I think it's a great idea. I'm definitely going to check it out and do the knowledge on it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's very telling. I think about our current political scene. When Donald Trump came into play, I thought it was very telling that when he met with African American so-called leaders, I mean, he's meeting with Kanye West, he's meeting with Steve Harvey and a number of other guys, and I don't think there's anything wrong in and of itself with that. I mean, it's it is what it is. People can go different directions with that, but I would say that I would love to see entrepreneurs like Jay Morrison and economists and people who really have something to say about policy, in those positions, to have that kind of influence. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really care, much love to Kanye for his music, but, I don't really care what he has to say about, about policy or anything else. You know what I'm saying? Uh-huh. But then the question is, why is it that, others don't go to, why would you go to Kanye West rather than Cornel West? You know what I'm saying? Or something like that. And I think it's because at the end of the day, economics is economics, bro. Like we can vote all day long, whether red or blue or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But if you don't have some green behind your name, then it seems to me that communities are just not taken seriously. And I think that's where the ownership comes in.
Yeah, well, there's some good news on that front, and this is something I was really excited to hear. On top of the economic opportunity zone law, that is going to be phenomenal. It could be phenomenal if it's done properly. But this summer, a few of the more influential African American business owners and hedge fund managers and a few folks went to had a couple meetings on the Vineyard and decided to create a super PAC called the Black Economic Alliance, BEA. And so
it's not like the Avengers or something like that.
It was a pretty powerful conversation, or a pretty powerful lunch, because they started with $3.5 million just in that conversation in donations, and so and since then it's grown. And the goal is that this is not a Democratic or Republican group. This is not LGBT, spiritual, non-spiritual. It is specifically black jobs and black economics, and that is it. Anything else is out of scope, and so they will only vote for people who have black jobs in mind and black economics in mind, to really again start to fix some of these societal issues. And so those are the types of ways we can respond, and kudos to that whole effort. And there are other ways other than, of course, collective pooling and investment clubs and investment groups. Just really the being able to take over your business community by launching small businesses and spending with the right businesses. What made some of these communities collapse is when a major corporation decided to just move out of that neighborhood. Right, they started to see white flight took place. Corporations just said, all right, we don't care either. And they got out of there. And then most of the tax revenue then went to policing. And so unfortunately, the corporate responsibility just hasn't been on our scope. So we would see Campbell's soup destroy a neighborhood like Trenton, and I'm roughly speaking, there is some research on it. I read it a long time ago, so don't quote me on exactly what they did, but say a Campbell's soup, and there were a couple businesses that left, like the Camden, Trenton area. And then when they left, literally, there was no responsibility for replacing, but yet none of us stopped drinking Campbell's soup. And they didn't even think about that. Because, if they fire somebody or if they put a banana on somebody's desk or something like that, it's a wrap. But they can just literally shut down a neighborhood and literally leave people, in the middle of an ocean drowning, same example, and leave it by the tens of thousands, but doesn't even miss a beat. And so I think that is where the economic buying power, the ability to really make a social stance, like what we are seeing with this Nike stock play and things of that nature. So I think we do have just a lot of ways now that I think people are starting to learn that are exciting, I think, that we can put our energy towards.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, speaking of Nike, man, they balling right now. You know what I'm saying? Kaepernick might not be balling, but they balling right now.
Well, I think his endorsement rating is definitely gonna went up. So seeing what happened to Nike, I'm not surprised if other international corporations or multinational corporations, which that is really a multinational play. The fact that 40% of Nike sales are U.S. and the rest are not, or have the inverse, but it's an international play, and so there are many countries that look at what's going on in America with a shame, and literally you travel outside the country and people just think we're literally being killed in the streets. And they're like, "Are you okay? You made it on your plane?" They really think it's that because they see the news, right? What the heck is going on over there? And so then they see, that the president will say something about a football player. So it's a multinational play. I think that I say that to answer your question. I think he's going to be just fine from an economic perspective because he keeps winning these awards.
He might end up on the next cover of Madden for real. The way he's going, he's not even in the league. You know what I'm saying? He might end up on Madden or something like that.
Well, there was a whole. Do you guys know about the Madden thing with EA Sports, right? Where they
I know about the Madden curse, but I don't know what you.
Oh yeah.
They had to put it back because they were like, "Oh no, we ain't playing with that market share."
Oh yeah, for real?
I as a matter of fact, I believe Nike stocks has not dropped, and as a matter of fact, they've gone up.
Yes, they've gone up since before the thing. Absolutely, since before the ad dropped.
Mm-hmm. So it's I think it's pretty interesting. I think it was I don't know if bold is too strong, but I thought it was an interesting move. I know there were other companies that actually wanted to use Kaepernick, and this can go to a whole conversation. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Black Mirror.
I've seen an episode or two of it. Yeah,
I haven't.
It's so
very interesting.
It's great on how technology can affect society and the world. And there's an episode on there where the guy's basically trying to, in a sense, he's the same dude that played on Get Out, and he's trying to break out of the matrix, and because there's a matrix, there's a kind of a system, and he's trying to break outside of the system, and he finally decides to rebel, and the system took his rebellion and made it a talk show. And so I kind of hope that doesn't happen to Kaepernick, right. Where his rebellion, or it really is not even rebellion, but his stance for social justice doesn't just become a commercial, just become a talk show, but that it reverberates and continues to cause disruption, as it has, versus being something that's cool. Right. That kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
Well, I think his ability to, I think he can ensure, maybe ensure is too strong of a word, but I don't want to say ensure, but I think that can be possible if he aligns himself with people who can take it beyond just the spokesperson role. And it's not to minimize what he's doing, but he's right now he's a spokesperson for a social cause. And I think the best thing he could do would be able to hand that off, so to speak, hand the momentum off to people who are administrating things like the Tulsa Fund and actually have boots on the ground economically and just in whatever different realm, in whatever different domain, just out there getting things done already. I think that would be the best thing he could do.
Yeah,
I mean, I know he's got like a charity, and I'm not 100% sure what he's been given to, but I think that the best thing he could do would be able to hand this momentum off to others who can take it that next step, like I was talking about before, like an economic movement to really get things done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's difficult to manage what you don't measure, and how do you measure success? Was the success that a couple other people knelt? Was the success that people are actually getting jobs and getting good education, and the economy is not going towards policing and mass incarceration and things of that nature? Like, if we have a concept of what a low expectation of what success looks like, then we may look at some of these smaller issues as success, such as an award for kneeling. But no, it's a spotlight, not a success. It's not a success in and of itself. Even Nike's sales going up is not a success. You should be celebrating the fact that that the highlight didn't destroy this person. Now, what is he highlighting? And that's why I love what you're saying. Where's a granular level of success that we should expect as a result of all this energy of highlighting these issues?
Right, definitely, man. So, so with that said, man, I just want to turn it over to you guys for some final thoughts, and we're going to slide on out. Rob, I'm going to go to you first, man.
Hey, it was just a pleasure having these talks. I could talk about this stuff all night and all day, and I love the energy, positive. We want to see a difference. We want to see, just talking to men that I know have the best interests of the community at heart, that really are thinking through these things, not from a philosophical standpoint, but I know the way you live your lives is what speaks to all this. And so just really excited about these conversations, and just looking forward to building. And the King movement, I really think, is just taking a whole, going in a direction that is really has a very special role with where the country is and what the country needs. So very excited about this time, and love to talk more economics when we get a chance. And have a good night, everyone.
Hey, no doubt, bro. No doubt, man. Good. It's great to have you on, man. A lot of insight. And Sean, I'm gonna slide to you, man. What you got there, bro?
Hey, man, I just enjoyed the conversation. Lane, I always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely loved hearing and learning from just some of the things that Rob Jones has been talking about, and would like to get to know you more, brother, because you sound like you have some things that I would be interested in learning.
Absolutely.
And,
you in the New York area?
What's up?
You in the New York area?
No, I'm in Virginia now.
Okay.
So
all right. You know you're from Queens. I was like, because I try to be in Queens a couple of times a week. So we'll definitely link up, though. I'm going to be in D.C. more often. So just there.
These New York cats, man. I can't say it's like a brotherhood, man. It's like international brotherhood of New Yorkers, dog. Like, we get it, man. All right, dog. He a VA now. You know what I'm saying?
That's how it is, man. But I love these conversations. I love hearing. All black people ain't the same, folks.
Right.
You have three brothers with similar hearts for their community, but doing such various things, have various interests, have various viewpoints and perspectives, and I just think it's healthy for the people, to hear that, what I'm saying, because we are broad, we are wide, we are strong, and so definitely a pleasure.
Amen, brothers.
Dope, man. That's great, man. That's dope. And I just want to say again, Sean, it's definitely a pleasure having you on, man. I know that the King Talks podcast is going to be in great hands with you taking the helm, man. And I'm still going to be here on these table talks to troll you whenever possible. You know what I'm saying, to give you a hard time. But definitely looking forward to chopping up with you as well, bro, as we move forward. So with that being said, love y'all, man. There it is, y'all. Just as we close out, just definitely want to say thank you to all the King Talks family that's riding with us out there. We love you guys, man. And as always, definitely want to stop through iTunes. Check us out on there, man. Give us 5 stars. Leave some comments and give us some feedback about, what you heard on this episode right here. We love hearing from y'all. And also don't forget that we are available on SoundCloud. So you definitely want to check us out there too, man. And just spread the word about what we're doing here at King Talks. Of course, if you're interested in the King movement specifically, you can definitely go to kingmovement.com, join our online community at no cost, no commitment to you. And with that being said, love you guys. And as always, strong in the
I brought the Kings with me on this one. It's a movement. Yeah. I had a dream. I saw black slaves in 2018, pulling the big king with a crown in the middle, looking like tug of war. I guess they forgot the inheritance of the Lord. Dying over streets when God gave him the earth. It's all in the Bible, just do your research. White man's religion, that's just fake news. The cross hit Africa for Europe even knew. This ain't black versus white, this is dark versus light. But racism might distract you from the Christ on sight. So here's the Visine.